Title: Fragments of a Mind. The rain fell like fingers of despair against the window as Rebecca stared into the murky darkness beyond her tiny cottage. It was a suffocating kind of night, thick with fog that swallowed the light of the street lamps. The shadows seemed to have crept closer, twisting and writhing as if alive. Yet, none of this compared to the dread that coiled tightly around her chest, a familiar friend in her increasingly fragmented reality. For the last 2 years, Rebecca had been grappling with the specter of dementia, a word that had etched itself into her mind with cruel certainty. The doctors had warned her about the slippery slope of its onset, but understanding and accepting were 2 worlds apart. Each day felt like a minefield filled with forgotten faces, misplaced objects, and words that floated just beyond her reach. Still, what was lost in the fog of her memory was often reclaimed in the manic bursts of her creativity. She poured her thoughts into her sketches, creating haunting figures that barely hinted at the chaos within her mind, wraiths and specters that danced across the pages, echoing her struggle. It was during these moments of solitude that Rebecca felt a shifting within her. The disease was not alone in its invasion. Familiar voices began to whisper from the corners of her mind, soft at first, but they grew louder with time. They no longer felt like the echoes of her own thoughts but rather belonged to someone else. She prayed it was just a symptom, a trick of her ailing brain, but there were nights when the whispers transformed into urgent cries. On one such night, the air heavy with humidity, Rebecca sat alone in her living room. The only light flickered nervously from the electric bulb above, casting elongated shadows against the walls. As she sketched, the voices began. "Help me, take it away." The words were garbled, incomprehensible, like a radio tuning into the static of a ghost. "Please, just stop," she shouted into the void, her breaths coming in short bursts. In that moment, a soft knock sounded at her door, a gentle but persistent rattle, as if beckoning her. Her heart raced. An uninvited horror creeped into the corners of her mind. Was it a figment or a visitor? With hesitance, she approached the door. The very wood felt alive, pulsing like a heart. She opened it a crack, peering into the darkness. No one was there. Frustrated yet frightened, she locked the door and retreated back to the comfort of her art. Yet, with every stroke of her pencil, she felt the creeping island of madness swallowing her thoughts. The whispers clawed at her sanity. "You're not alone, Rebecca. We are always with you." The utterance twisted her gut into knots. Suddenly, she was jolted by the sound of scratching, like nails against wood, imperceptibly quiet at first but then rising to a fever pitch. It lurched her back to the door, trepidation mounted within her as she pressed her ear against the cool surface. Nothing. "Stop it," she slammed a hand against the door, but the scratching only intensified. Before she could gather her senses, Rebecca wrenched the door open again. The night enveloped her in its eerie stillness. There, under the feeble glow of a street lamp, stood a figure, a woman, shrouded in darkness, her features distorted and blurred. Sorrow etched into the lines of her face. "Help me," the figure said, a voice resonating with Rebecca's deepest fears. Everything within her twisted. "I need to get out." Quote, visions exploded in her mind. Images of a dilapidated room where the shadows loomed larger, twisted faces peering from the darkness. She stumbled back, gasping. They were reaching out, their mouths forming silent screams. "No, you're not real," she shouted, clutching her temples. "You're just a part of it. A figment. Let me in, Rebecca. You can save me. You can save us all." Quote, rational thought fled as she was engulfed by the overwhelming presence of her tormentors, shapes of abandonment and despair. Rebecca's scream echoed across the empty street, neither alive nor unheard. "Stop," she stumbled backward, tripping over her feet, crashing into the wall of her own crumbling mind. The woman stepped forward, stepping into the pools of lamplight. "This is what you wanted. Don't you see? We are you." Rebecca clutched her heart, her breaths fast and erratic. The world around her warped, coiling into madness. "No, I'm not crazy," she cried, unaware of the descent she had already taken. As she sat in the flickering light, shadowy figures emerged from the depths of her mind, and the screams echoed louder. Clawing at her, begging for release. With an anguished howl, she ripped the nearest pencil from her grasp and began to sketch the figure, lines blurring into hysteria. The woman seemed to fade, and with her, Rebecca felt a dreadful peace wash over her, a numbness that promised to silence the chaos. Lost within the page, she drew until her hand ached, ripping through the veil of reality and despair. With each stroke, she let go. Of memories, of hope, of a future that might never unfold. The last whisper she heard before the darkness closed in was not one of pain, but a gentle reminder. "We are always with you, Rebecca, always." Quote, as the walls of her mind crumbled, she welcomed the embrace of shadows, surrendering finally to the comforting silence within.